But Brady Smigel, I don't know, decommits from Florida State. Likely, in my opinion, probably didn't see himself as a fit in this offense. I think that there's a weird kind of narrative that Gus's offenses are so different than Mike's, and both Gus and Mike have kind of come out and said, like, that's not really the case. Like, Mike came up under Gus. There are some different wrinkles, but essentially they like to do a lot of the same things. And so this is the second QB that has either now decommitted or left in the portal, right? You think about Luke, thinking that they weren't really a fit for what Gus wanted to do. And so I don't know if one of two things is true, and I don't know which side it is. Either Gus and Mike are lying when they say their offenses aren't that different, which I don't necessarily think they're lying. That's not my take. Or they're not doing a good enough job talking with recruits about how similar their offenses were. Because Gus and Mike are telling you that their offenses are pretty similar and they like to do a lot of the same things, and they're not massive changes coming in. And recruits are kind of, and guys on the roster, like Luke talking about this, are under the impression that things are very, very different. So which side is it? Are Gus and Mike like wrong? Are the offenses so different that QBs don't even want to be a part of it? Is that just maybe maybe there's a third option? That's just kind of a convenient excuse as to why guys leave. Or are they not doing a good enough job conveying that their offenses are very similar, that things aren't changing that much, that they still can be successful in this system? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that, right? It's just kind of an open-ended question of, well, where is the disconnect, right? Because we're being told one thing over here, and then recruits and players have a little bit of a different impression over on this side. I don't know what the answer is, but again, there's a trend, and I think that trend will stop because now Gus will be recruiting guys that he's got a relationship with, but that is kind of interesting to me or strange to me. If you're betting on the Super Bowl, if you're betting on college basketball, if you're betting on tennis at 3 a.m. in another country, make sure you're doing it with BetUS. YouTube 150 gets you 150% sign-up bonus on your first deposit, 125 on your next two. All of that up to $2,000. Use our code, again, YouTube 150 over at BetUS. I do think that Florida State will probably pick up a blue chip quarterback. I know they're targeting 2 or 3 right now. We can maybe do a video later on QB options, but that's not really the goal of this video. I'm not panicking. I'm not melting down that Brady decommitted. I do think that he's a really good quarterback, and it does stink to lose him, but maybe somewhat understandable, right? If he's under the impression that the offense isn't the best fit for him, it's good to get this over with now and not get played for an entire cycle like Tramel Jones did last year. So yeah, I'd rather this happen now than in October and leave you scrambling to go get the Oklahoma kid or go get, whomever. So it's not good that you have a top 10 quarterback decommit. Would certainly rather a top 10 quarterback decommit in January than in October or November, like happened to you last year. And unfortunately, under Norvell, seems to happen quite a bit. And I put this together on Twitter, and a lot of people got mad at it. A lot of people kind of understood it. But quarterback recruiting, and I don't know if you want to call this unlucky, bad recruiting. Obviously, you can justify or you can kind of answer any of these. You can kind of look at it and say like, well, this one there's an answer for, this one there's an answer for, this one happened because of this one happened because of that one. I do think you could justify a lot of these, but at the end of the day, if you're having to make excuses for 12 different occurrences, ultimately the buck stops with the head coach, right? Like ultimately when this continues to happen and you have to justify it over and over and over again, you can start to take some takeaways. If you look at every quarterback that Florida State has had contact with or been recruiting at some point under Mike Norvell, it has not ended super well. Now, you look at Sims, the very first one, decommitted. Obviously, I think Florida State moved on from him. I'm not blaming Norvell for that or anything, but there's your first decommitment. You then got Chubba Purdy and Tate Rodemaker. Both of them transferred, right? Tate was here for several years, but then transferred. Luke Altmaier, decommitted from you. Mackenzie Milton was brought in through the portal. He was terrible. Nico Marchiol, decommitted from you. You went and got AJ Duffy after that. He didn't want to play with 2 quarterbacks. So you can start to justify some of these things. AJ Duffy transferred. Chris Parson didn't want to be on a roster with didn't want to be in a class with two quarterbacks. He decommits. Brock Glenn, only one that's still on the roster, but he's in year 3, and I don't think we are sold on him being the guy just yet. We'll see. Luke Kromenhoek, transfer. DJ Uyunglele came in, terrible. Tramel Jones, decommitted. Brady Smigel, decommitted. Now you do have Sperry on the roster. You have Castellanos on the roster. Those are TBDs. And you can look through a lot of these and say like, hey, I understand this one. I understand why this one happened. I understand why this one happened. But I do think from a big picture perspective, when you have that many decommits, that many transfers, that many guys that were terrible on your roster that you recruited, right? Like guys that Florida, like Mike, I'm not talking about him inheriting Jordan Travis. Obviously, getting Jordan Travis was a big deal for Florida State, and Mike developing him was a big deal as well. But outside of that, like Mike has known from the moment that he got here that Jordan Travis would not be on this roster forever. I think there's a mixture of issues here. One is the ability to recruit. And I don't think we've recruited well enough at the quarterback position. Obviously, Luke was a really good commit, really good signee for Florida State. But I don't think outside of maybe Luke, I don't think we've had massive recruiting wins on the trail. Look at where a lot of these guys have ended up. Some people were replying to my tweet that had a lot of this in it and said like, well, who was good after they left Florida State? Well, Luke Altmaier had a good year this year, a decommit. But outside of that, no, nobody was good. Nobody has been good after leaving Florida State. And that's a problem. Because if they weren't good at a smaller school, they probably weren't going to be good at Florida State. And so that maybe calls into question the evaluation. That maybe calls into question the recruiting. Like maybe you should get better guys. Maybe you should recruit better quarterbacks. And I know that Mike likes to find the diamond in the rough. He did that with Luke, but I don't think he's found enough diamonds in the rough, right? Eventually you just got to start landing ballers. To win in college football, you got to have ballers on your team. That's what it comes down to. We were fortunate, we were blessed that Jordan turned into that. I don't think Jordan was that when he was here year 1 under Mike in 2020, but he did turn into that, right? And so we were fortunate with that. And Jordan masked a lot of issues. But don't sell me on the fact that you can't bring in good quarterbacks because a good quarterback is on your roster. Look at Texas. Look at Alabama. Look at Georgia. I hate it, guys, but look at Florida with DJ Lagway there. And they've got 2 blue chips committed after him as well. One of them that they stole from us. So I don't buy the idea that you can't get good talent when there's a good quarterback ahead of them. And so that would be my big takeaway. It's not that Mike's terrible. I'm not saying fire Mike. I'm not saying any of that. But QB recruiting has been a problem here. It's a problem really in a lot of phases, in my opinion. The recruiting side of it, the evaluation side of it, and truth be told, I understand what happened with Jordan Travis, but the development side of that hasn't been very good either. Right? You had Tate on your roster for 3+ years and couldn't get enough out of him to have him be the guy. You had Duffy on your roster for multiple years and couldn't get enough out of him for him to be the guy. You've had Glenn now on your roster. This is his 3rd year, and you still went to the portal to over-recruit him because you're not confident that he can be the guy. Your portal guys have not been good in Milton and Uyunglele. Hopefully Castellanos breaks that trend. But I do think that the quarterback position, the most important position, has largely, outside of an inherited and very well-developed Jordan Travis, has largely been a miss. And hopefully the development at that position increases, gets better, improves, because though Jordan Travis covered up a lot of things on this team and made you a really elite team, winning 23 games in 2 years, I do think that the development behind him has been pretty terrible. Who has this staff developed outside of Jordan, right? Like I'll give you credit for developing Jordan, but they've not done a good job with quarterbacks outside of Jordan Travis. If we can just be very fair and very blunt and very frank there. Hopefully that improves, but the track record is not great, especially with guys that Mike Norvell has handpicked. Mike Norvell didn't handpick Jordan Travis. He was on the roster when Mike got here. Mike did a phenomenal job with him. I'm not taking anything away from that. But with the guys that Mike has selected, a ton of them that we just listed out, it has not worked out very well. And hopefully gets better, right? Hopefully improves. Hopefully we start to see some of that this year with Castellanos. Hopefully Sperry ends up being a guy, right? Like I'd love for Kevin Sperry to be really, really good. I don't have a lot of thoughts. I don't have a lot of projections on that. I don't think he's super close. Maybe Brock Glenn steps up and is your guy this year, beats out Castellanos. Again, don't have a lot of projections for that. I think Castellanos starts that Bama game, but we'll see, right? I think that quarterback position is so important, and I think it really is what hopefully will get Florida State kind of turned back around, is the improvement in that room. Questions about Tokars, questions about the quarterback. If you're a quarterback coach, and we probably give Dillingham a ton of the credit for what happened with Jordan Travis, if you're a quarterback coach, you have to develop and recruit quarterbacks. That is your job. And at the end of the day, Alex Atkins was fired because he couldn't develop offensive line. At the end of the day, Randy Shannon was fired because he couldn't recruit linebackers. At the end of the day, Odell was probably asked to move off field because they didn't think they were getting enough out of the defensive line. All those things. Same thing with Ron Dugans. Couldn't develop a wide receiver. We'd bring in talent, couldn't develop them. I think if you go through this many quarterbacks, if you've had this much of an issue, there would be probably some questions around, what's happening with Tokars. I'm not saying you fire him. I'm not calling for somebody's head in January. I do think that it's probably fair to mention his name in a segment like this, talking about QB recruiting. I'm more than happy to hear your comments. I know that, negative things don't typically do as well. Everybody likes to drink the Kool-Aid. Everybody likes to be super positive, super hyped up about things. I'm not necessarily reading the live comments right now. I will go back through them if we get some time at the end. But I do think, if you're watching this on replay, I think it's a fair question of what the heck's going on at the quarterback position at Florida State. Again, Jordan covered up a lot. Jordan's not here anymore. We can't live on 2023 anymore, right? It's 25. We won 2 games last year. It's time to start talking about other people than Jordan Travis.